We don't have one joint account. She has her money, I have my money.
This is what you both signed up for. Combine it and shut up.
Now, this is probably going to be the most controversial topic that I will ever discuss on this channel, and I recently did a survey on my channel about whether you combine or separate your finances with your spouse. And the result of that survey was 56% combined and 44% separate out of the 1,200 people I surveyed. And the comment section of that survey was pretty split between why people combine their finances and why people separate their finances with their spouses. And I'm going to provide my opinion at the end of this video. The ultimate question will come down to whether you can achieve financial independence and retire early by keeping your finances separate. The first one is, can we keep our finances separate so that if things don't work out between us, we can keep things completely separate in a divorce? Now, I never give financial advice about how to plan for a divorce unless you are already at that stage. You should always do everything possible before actually filing any legal paperwork. But one of the many reasons why couples don't combine their finances is because one or both of them have been burned in the past and they believe keeping their finances separate would keep their problems at bay. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this, and you probably don't want to be told by your other spouse what to do with your spending or savings. And this is pretty common for people who went through a divorce in the past, or they had some kind of financial difficulties with their families in the past. And I've been through a divorce, and I totally get why people become more protective of their finances when all you hear is these horror stories about how the other spouse took half of the other spouse's retirement account. The statistics even show that divorced individuals have to rebuild their net worth from scratch, and they lose on average about 77% of their net worth, not to mention the potential child support and alimony you'll have to pay over the course of several years. But keeping your finances separate during a marriage does not mean they'll stay separate in the divorce. Towards the end of my previous marriage, I started to keep my finances separate from my ex-wife during our separation, but the judge still ruled that we had to split everything 50-50, even though the house was under my name, and I still had to split the profit from the sale of the house between me and my ex-wife. Now, this is not legal advice, and I'm just sharing my experience from when I went through a divorce back in 2013. But just remember that keeping your finances separate during your marriage does not guarantee that you will get to keep what's supposed to be yours during your divorce. I've also heard an argument that if you had your assets under a trust or an LLC, then you could protect yourself from the matrimonial assets considered for division in a divorce. Generally speaking, if the trust was established prior to the marriage, because it's a separate entity, then it's going to be difficult for the ex to access the funds. However, if the trust was established during the marriage, then it's more likely that the ex will be able to access the funds. But it's still going to be up to the judge to decide on a fair division. The family court system is so broken because a lot of times the judges make very biased decisions. So if I'm being completely honest, if you're already in a marriage, you have to accept the fact that everything is shared unless you have a separate entity that is established prior to your marriage. You might even have a prenuptial agreement or prenup that can protect certain assets of yours. Some prenups might not hold up in court if the judge believes that one spouse was coerced into signing the agreement. And I think it's best to have each spouse hire their own attorneys before signing a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement. And if you're interested in joining my private client program to get financial coaching and financial planning services, you can schedule a free consultation with me by visiting firesightchat.com/coaching. I also recently launched a brand new website where you can sign up for a free membership to get your free financial resources by visiting firesightchat.com/resources. You do not need a credit card to apply whatsoever. These financial resources are absolutely free for you to use. And the second question I got is whether you should combine or separate finances with someone you're not married to. The simple answer is no. You should not combine finances with someone you're not married to. You have absolutely no legal protections if your boyfriend or girlfriend decides to run away with someone else. If you live together with that person and that person decides to leave you, they have no legal obligation to pay you any alimony or split any equity. This also applies to people who are engaged. If one of you decides to say, I do not, at the wedding, then one of you will end up with all of these liabilities. Now, if you think your relationship is moving to the next level, it's important to talk about your financial future. Is your boyfriend or girlfriend a spender or a saver? Does she have any debt? Does he budget? You want to make sure there aren't any red flags before you decide to take it to the next level. Talking about money forces the two of you to discuss the goals, dreams, and how you want to retire. And if you guys are living together, the easiest way to split your expenses is to share everything down the middle, with each of you paying half. My advice is to also keep your income into consideration. For example, if partner A makes $5,000 a month and partner B makes $7,000 a month, and your rent is, let's say, $3,000 a month, then you can split the bill based on each other's income by 60% and 40%. So partner A, who makes $5,000 a month, pays $1,200 a month in rent, while partner B, who makes $7,000 a month, pays $1,800 a month in rent, which makes it a 60-40 split. Some unmarried couples even make the free-for-all approach by saying, I'll pay the rent and you'll pay for groceries and utilities. Be careful with this approach because you might create some resentment with each other when one expense becomes higher than the other. If one of you gets the short end of the stick, you might be hesitant to say something to avoid any confrontation. The rent is a constant bill, while groceries and utilities are much more variable. And I personally don't recommend this approach, and I would rather split all the bills based on each partner's income. But whatever you do, do not share any of your assets. There's always a chance of something bad happening to your relationship in the future. You should not have any shared savings or checking accounts. Do not co-sign for your partner's loan, because if your partner leaves you, you're still on the hook for that loan if your ex-partner decides to stop making payments. That could have negative consequences, like sending that loan to a collection or free-falling your credit scores. And I have heard countless horror stories when someone co-signs with someone else and ends up leaving them hanging. And if you're married, however, you're legally protected from these assets and liabilities because you're splitting 50 and 50. And speaking of assets, the third question I always get is why you shouldn't buy a house with someone you're not married to. I always say that you should never buy any assets with someone you're not married to, but a lot of people do it anyway. You have to remember that there are no legal protections for the financial well-being of unmarried couples who buy a home together. If you break up and only one person's name is on the mortgage and title, the other person may completely miss out on the equity of the home. So if you weren't married and you didn't have your name on the house, which is common because mortgage applications only consider the individual with a better income and better credit score, then you're basically becoming the renter of the home. Now, if you insist that you want to buy a house with your partner before marriage, or you just never want to get married, you should each get with an attorney and draw up a legal document before purchasing a property together. You need to make it clear in your legal agreement that if your relationship becomes sour, there's going to be a procedure in place to buy one of you out of the property. It would be awkward if you break up with that person and that person refuses to move out of the house, right? What if that person starts a new relationship with someone else and brings them to your house? How awkward would that be? Then there's the matter of paying the mortgage on your own. If both of you are on the mortgage application or the deed and you decide to buy that person out, you bought this house with a 30-year fixed mortgage and 3% interest rate. But in 2023 and 2024, the interest rates are higher at 7 or 8%. Now you're going to have to refinance your mortgage from a 3% rate to a 7 or 8% rate just to get the other person out of the deed. It becomes a complete nightmare scenario. And if I were in that situation, the best way would be to just sell the property and split the equity. But the bottom line is that I would not purchase a property with someone I'm not married to. And the fourth question I got frequently is why combine their finances when one spouse is not good with money at all? This is a very common thing that we hear when one of you is a natural saver and the other one likes to spend, spend, and spend. You may be the spouse who likes to budget and the other spouse who doesn't like to budget at all. Building a household budget is like building a trust between you and your spouse. This is going to be your ultimate test of this relationship. Do you love this person enough to be with them even though they're terrible with budgeting? But the best way to approach someone you love who is not as good at finances as you are is to say something like, hey, I want us to retire together. In order to do that, we need to achieve financial independence so that we don't have to work our 9-to-5 jobs for the rest of our lives. It's a long journey ahead, and I need your help making this happen. That sounds better than, hey, I need you to get your act together and start budgeting your money, right? And let me show you how my wife and I operate our finances. All of our paychecks come into one joint checking account. All of our bills are automatically paid from the same checking account. We also have several savings accounts. We have a fully funded emergency fund, an annual spending account, a discretionary fund, and a travel fund. We also each have our own retirement accounts. This is because the IRS dictates that only one individual can own each retirement account. And I have my 401k, Roth IRA, and HSA. My wife has her own retirement accounts with her employer. The common misconception is that if you're a stay-at-home spouse, the spouse can create a retirement account at all. That is not true. A stay-at-home spouse can open up what's called a Roth IRA or a spousal Roth IRA and contribute to it as long as you guys are filing your taxes jointly. We also have several non-retirement investment accounts that we own jointly because they're not 401k or Roth IRA. We can actually own these accounts jointly. The only bank accounts I have separated are my business accounts, and that's to make sure I keep my business and personal completely separate. And I have an LLC, and the last thing I want to experience is for the judge to pierce the corporate veil. The bank accounts are owned by the LLC that I created so that I can continue my financial coaching and financial planning services without jeopardizing my personal assets. And each of us has our own credit cards that we completely pay off in full every single month. We sort of set a limit to how much we want to spend each month without talking to each other so that there's some financial freedom from one another. That's why we have our financial meeting once a month to talk about what we want to spend in the next month. We don't just impulse purchase anything. If I want to buy an Xbox in December, that's going to cost me $500. But I'm going to make sure I talk to my wife about it. But nobody in the marriage should be seeking permission from one another to buy something, but instead change the wording to an agreement between the two of you that makes sense to your household budget. And I think a lot of times I hear people say that they need to ask their spouse's permission before they buy anything. Nobody should be superior to the other when it comes to finances. You're both equal in the decision-making process when it comes to purchasing, saving, or investing, regardless of your income. But you also have to be reasonable too. If one of you wants to buy a $500 Xbox in December, but you're trying to pay off your debt or trying not to make your budget go into the negative balance, then it probably doesn't make sense to purchase an Xbox that is considered a discretionary spending, right? And you want to make sure that it is very clear between two spouses that no one spouse is more superior than the other. Just because one spouse makes $200,000 a year and the other spouse makes $100,000 a year, it doesn't mean that person, that spouse with $200,000 income has all the say. That's not how it works in a couple, okay? That's where you need to work together and say, nope, this is our joint income and we are going to achieve financial independence and retire early together. I don't think my wife and I would have gotten to where we are today financially if we hadn't worked together as a team. We want to retire together and we both agreed on the same financial independence number. We know how much money we spend and save every single month by using the same old spreadsheets. We have a financial meeting once a month to talk about our spending and savings for the next month. It's working for us because we're working as one household and not two separate individuals. Can we achieve financial independence if we keep our finances separate? My honest opinion is no. We won't be able to. If we kept our finances separate, then one of us would end up retiring earlier while one of us continues to work to get to that number, right? It just doesn't make sense to keep finances separate if we're working on financial independence and retiring early together. And a lot of times people would assume that it's the money issue, when in reality, it's a marital issue or a relationship problem. If you've been burned before by your ex, trust me, I've been there. You need to take some time to work on that trust with yourself. I had to do the same. And I know gaining someone's trust will take time. So if you're single right now is the time to work on yourself mentally and financially. And if you're in a relationship and looking to get married in the future, you need to have these money conversations to make sure that you are financially compatible with one another. Maybe she's not good at saving money, or he's not good at investing. Maybe you're both good at making a budget that works for the both of you. But anyway, this has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.